Hey guys, the number one question that I have received as a knife maker for decades is, how do you sharpen a knife? I always hear people say, I suck at sharpening knives, I don't know how to sharpen. Can you show me how to sharpen knives on a stone? And I gotta be honest with you, first and foremost, it may not actually necessarily be you and your skills that's lacking. It could actually be the knife that you're trying to sharpen. And real quick, I'm gonna touch on a couple of those things. Edge geometry is super important on a knife. So when you feel the edge from the top of the spine down to the edge and you just kind of feel it like so, if there's a bunch of thickness back behind that edge, if it's really heavy, that's just more steel that's going to be in the way for you to sharpen as you're trying to remove steel. The other thing is hardness and type of alloy of the steel. I hear people say like, well, I have a knife that's 67 Rockwell. Well, that's fine, I guess, but one, that blade's gonna be brittle, and two, in order to keep that blade from breaking, that knife company is gonna have to make that blade really thick. That also means that blade is extremely, extremely hard. And by being hard and really wear resistant, it's gonna resist you sharpening it on a stone, which is gonna add complications to that process. So, making sure that you have a good knife with the right steel and the right heat treating, that's all stuff that's somewhat out of your control. You can only really control that by what knife you purchase at the store. And that's why our blades, I think, have been so popular, is I make our blades with thinner edge geometry, I'm using the right steel. I know every single knife that's ever been made is going to go dull, including ours. The question is can you resharpen it? Can you get that edge back in the field with a little touch up? I want you to be able to resharpen your blades to keep going in the field. Granted, at a certain point, they're gonna get bad enough that if you don't have the skills on a stone, you just may need to use our generations program and send them back in, let us get them kind of reset, resharpened for free, and we'll send them back to you ready to go again. So this is more of a video about how to use a stone at home, kind of a bench stone situation. This really isn't just like a quick little field touch-up. This is more of a, hey, I'm gonna do a fairly heavy resharpening at home on my MKC knife or any other knife on your bench in your garage or in your kitchen. The first thing to consider is stone selection. And quite frankly, I'm gonna go into that in a different video. This is really more about how to do it. But that being said, this stone and this knife in particular isn't super, super dull, and it isn't in really, really bad shape. So I'm using 1,000 grit side of my stone here. Anywhere from 600 to 1,000 grit is great for a hunting knife or even a chef's knife. That being said, if this knife needed a lot more work done to it, and if it was in really bad condition, I may flip that stone over or get a different stone that has maybe like a 220 grit side or a 400 grit side to do some heavier work before I finished it. This particular work sharp stone that we sell actually has a 6,000 grit side on the other side, which is super, super fine, more for like in the kitchen chef's knife type stuff. We're not gonna use that side on this for a hunting knife. So the first thing that I'm gonna cover is what direction do we actually go on the stone. So I go backwards, quote unquote backwards, from what you maybe typically have seen. And here's the reason why. If I go like this and I start with my plunge grind back here at the edge of the stone and I work this way, what's gonna happen, and this is the thinnest part of the knife here, the tip is the thinnest part. I'm gonna come across there, and what you're gonna end up with over time is a rounded tip. It's not gonna be nice and pointy. You're going to remove more steel quicker at the tip than you are back here on the blade where there's more steel around it, and it's even a little bit thicker. I'm actually gonna start up more on this top corner of the stone with my tip here, and I'm gonna work backwards to this point. And here's why. At that point, I can control if I wanna stand this blade up more and really get on that tip for some reason, or I can rock that blade down and actually stay off of the tip just a little bit and create a little gap there, and maybe even start sharpening in behind the tip just a little bit. So I can start right in here and work backwards this direction. Okay, so before I get too far into the actual sharpening part of the process here, the one question, the magic question I always get is, what angle do you sharpen your blades at? And quite frankly, people get a little bit too consumed with the angle. I generally tell people it's between 15 and 20 degrees. The slighter the angle that you have, the more easily that knife's gonna pass through material, but you're also gonna have a little bit less material behind the edge to put up to, you know, very aggressive, say, chopping and pounding through knots and wood and stuff like that. So when you increase that angle to like 20 degrees, you start to create more of a wedge, right? So if you came all the way out to a 45 degree, you're gonna be like this. It's gonna be somewhat what I would akin to like an axe or a maul for splitting wood. It's more of a steep angle that's splitting through stuff. However, that's gonna be very hard to sharpen. It's gonna be hard to keep sharp. It's not gonna pass through material nicely. What I like is that 15 to 20 degrees, I always tell people shoot for 17. But honestly, if you're 15 or 20, it doesn't really matter. I will say on these work sharp stones, they have some little degree pieces here that you can actually insert in the stone. So if I want 15 degrees, I can insert this 15 degree side, and I can actually lay my blade on here and see what 15 degrees actually looks like. I can translate that to the stone. I leave those off and out of the way because I don't really need them. They also have a 17 degree side, so if you want to do that, you just push these through and drop them in. But that kind of covers the angle at which you should sharpen. And that will come with some experience and with some practice. So when we're going to sharpen this knife, we're going to actually start working on one side heavily. And the number one thing that I'm going to want you to remember is that you're trying to get a burr. And I'm going to explain that. I wish you were all here and could feel for it. It would make a lot more sense, but I think I can explain it good enough for you. So I'm going to work on that stone, like I said, with the tip up here in this direction. And as you will see on the stone, there's actually a little bit of water. It's a little bit wet. In fact, I can grab a water bottle, and if I want, just drop a tiny bit of water on that stone. That adds some lubrication to the stone, actually helps the stone work better. And then once in a while, you might take a rag and actually wipe off that extra steel and keep putting water on it. A nice fresh stone cuts better and is more aggressive. So I'm going to work on one side of this blade repeatedly, as much as I need to get the results I'm looking for. So here's what I'm looking for. As I do that, I'm going to feel with my fingers from above the edge on the blade. I'm going to put my fingers up here. I'm going to feel down across the edge, on the edge of the side that is facing me. So if I'm here and I go this way, I'm going to pick that knife up and I'm going to feel for a burr on this side. What's happening is as you're going across that stone and you're cutting across the actual surface of that edge, you're going to start to roll steel up to the side that's facing you. And what that tells you is that tells you where you have and haven't actually contacted the edge. So let's just say you do a particular task and you use a lot of this part of the edge right here, but you don't use this much back here. Well, in your first few passes, you might actually feel a burr back here where that edge really didn't have a lot of damage. But up in here, you may actually have to go to work and just work that area a bunch right in here and just kind of work back and forth and just keep going. Again, I'm only going one direction. I'm not actually back and forth on the stone, one direction. And then I can feel, and it's like, okay, I'm starting to actually feel a little bit of a burr there. I want to feel for that burr all the way down the length of the edge until I make a full pass all the way across, a couple full passes all the way, and then I can feel for that all the way down. And yes, now I do have a burr. Now we're going to flip that blade and we're going to do the exact same thing on the other side. We're going to start on this corner. We're going to work that blade away, and we're just going to keep working this blade like so. And we're gonna start to feel for the burr, again, on the side of the blade that's facing us. So that burr was on this side, that edge and that stone had rolled that edge up towards us. We flip that over, we work it this way, and now that stone rolls that edge back up this direction. So as we feel for that burr all the way, and it's like, well, yeah, so right here, I'm missing it just a little bit. I don't quite have it. I might just work in that area a little bit and then take a couple full passes. All right, so now I can feel that burr. It's there, feels good, it's aggressive. I am not feeling down across the edge this way that you would traditionally feel. We're not trying to feel if the knife is sharp yet. We're only looking to see if we were making contact with that edge all the way on that stone. So once we have established the burr, now we want to begin to refine the size of it and to align it with the center of the knife. And if you look under a magnifying glass, that burr is going to be really heavy, and because you feel it on one side of the knife, it's going to be rolled over really hard on one side of that edge. So now that burr's rolled over on one side and it's really aggressive and heavy, it looks like a really big aggressive saw laid over to the edge. We're going to start to bring those teeth back to the center, and we're going to reduce the size of them. The way we're going to do that, and again, this is fairly firm pressure, we're going to start alternating sides, one side and then the other, one side and then the other, back and forth with fairly firm pressure. What we're going to do as we do that, we'll now start to lighten our pressure up. So I'm here, I'm nice and firm on a couple passes, and then we start to lighten until at the very end, it's really just the weight of the blade coming across that stone. Okay, at this point, it's just super, super light pressure, and I'm getting ready to go to the final stage, which is the strop. So I've gotten final stages done. I can actually feel a little teeny tiny of a bit of a burr on one side, and that's just because that was the last side that I took that last little stroke on the stone. There's just maybe a little tiny burr there. You might not even feel it. It feels pretty sharp already, so if I don't strop it right now, this knife would actually work just fine. So that really covers the stone portion of sharpening. And like I say, if you start in on your stone and you're just not getting enough progress, flip your stone over or get another stone that's a rougher grit and do that initial heavy burr work on a rougher side of your stone, and then switch to a finer one and repeat the process just with maybe less work and effort. And you want to reduce down that size of that burr. A heavy aggressive grit stone is going to create a really big heavy aggressive burr that isn't going to leave you a real nice fine edge. But it is going to accomplish the task of kind of resetting those bevels, resetting those angles, and getting to where you can go to a finer grit and do these final passes that you need to do to really refine that edge. All right, guys, we have completed the stone portion of the sharpening, and we're ready to go to the strop. And even though we took our last couple passes on that stone super, super light, the last pass you took always leaves that edge rolled over to one side just a little bit. So we're going to go to that strop, and you're actually going to see on this strop the scratches from the one side of the blade, and the other side of the blade won't leave any scratches. When you see those scratches on your strop, that's the side you know you need to work just a little bit harder, and then we'll go back and forth on their alternating sides and making sure that we really align that wire edge. We refine it a little bit, and it'll leave that hair popping edge that you're looking for. All right, so when we go to the strop, we're looking to actually align that little bit of that wire edge down the center of the blade, remove any little bit of loose particles that are along that edge, and just kind of refine the edge a little bit. What you're going to notice on the strop here is you're going to see a set of scratches on one side of the blade or the other that the blade's going to leave on there. And the reason for that is that's the last side that we took that final small stroke on the stone with our light pressure. So I'm going to start down here again with about our 20-degree angle, 17-degree angle, and I'm going to come up the strop. Now watch, you're going to see where we're going to have scratches. See how that knife is actually chattering just a little bit. That is that wire edge that's rolled over to one side. So I'm going to put a little more pressure on that side, and then I'm going to go to this side. And I'm going to just take 2 or 3 passes, and they're already getting better. So when I do this now, very few scratches actually, and the knife is no longer hanging up. So that edge has really aligned itself really, really well. And I now no longer have scratches on my strop, which tells me that that edge is really perfectly aligned down the center of the blade. All right, so we've seen the strop, we've done all the stone work, we've stropped the blade, and now we're time to test out the blade. This is a nice document that looks like a bill, so these are the perfect things to cut, and we'll see how it runs through paper. Beautifully, right through paper. What you're looking for here is if something hangs up. So like if I get a hang right here, or maybe as I'm cutting through, it slides and it actually doesn't cut the paper. That's maybe a spot, like a flat spot on the edge that you didn't get enough stone work. You got to go back to the stone and do a little bit more work on that area. Maybe if it hangs just a bit, like it catches, you might just go back to the strop, or maybe a couple really light passes on the stone where you just have kind of a spot on your edge. So that is how you sharpen a knife on a stone with a leather strop. Put your knives to work, everybody.